Hello and welcome everyone to GameGuru Max live broadcast, December live broadcast. I'm not going to apologise for the delay, it was completely deliberate. I wanted to start 8 minutes after the hour to signify 8-bit computers. And I've been looking at the stats, we have 16 watchers, which is in testimony to the 16-bit era. Before we skipped 32, went straight to 64-bit computing. And probably not going to get 128-bit computing. But you're here because you've been waiting for a broadcast for, 5 months. So I just want to do the usual tests. So first off, thanks very much for everyone who was attended. And if you miss it, obviously you'll be watching this on YouTube because we're going to put this up on YouTube as a recording with a bit of tweaks and edits. Probably tweak out the first 7 minutes of the hypnotic splash screen. So I'm very quickly going to go to my chat. You can't see it, but I can. Well, you can see it. It's on the right side of the screen. And I'm going to look at the bottom of the chat. Obviously later, when I look at your live questions, I'm going to go right back to the top. Just want anyone to say, yes, we can hear you. And it looks like Spicy Sausage has got it right in there. Audio is good. I did listen to feedback from 6 months ago complaining that my voice was a bit quiet. Well, I had everything up to 100%, but it turns out with a bit of fiddling, the OBS software allows you to increase the gain on the microphone. So even though I'm picking up at 100%, you can artificially amplify the microphone data before it goes out to the stream. Very cool. So I wanted to to say that I have actually listened and I've done something about it. For anyone who's joining us probably for the first time, because 6 monthly broadcasts means we're probably going to get some new users, I must make it very clear I am not a YouTuber. Obviously anyone who is in the community knows that full well. I certainly have the gab to be one, but I prefer to tinker with computers, fix bugs and create little features, generally in the sphere of game making technologies. So this is your we've set a limit, well, not a limit, but we're going to set a goal, an aspiration if you will. The last broadcast we did 6 months took 2.5 hours to get through. As you know, or you may know, there is no such thing as a 2.5 hour YouTube video. They're usually like 8 minutes long. So we just wanted to sort of control that a little. Obviously there's a lot to get through, especially when we get to live questions. So we're going to set ourselves a little goal of 1.5 hours for the official Q&A, and then 30 extra minutes if we need it to bring the broadcast up to the 2-hour mark. I think that's probably good. And if we can all know that at the beginning, then of course you can get your questions in a bit earlier, get the use out of this live broadcast within those time limits, and then we all get to move on with our lives 2 hours from now, or looking at the clock, maybe 2 hours and 8 minutes. I'm not going to be cruel and count the 8 minutes that you was just watching the splash screen. So let's call it 38 extra minutes if we need it. So for those who don't know, get your questions in now. There's a chat window where you can ask a question. It's easier if you put the word question in capitals or a couple of question marks at the end of your sentence. The reason is that I can scroll through quickly from the top of the chat to the bottom, find those questions, answer them quickly, move on to the next one. Sometimes we have broadcasts where we run out of time and we don't get all the questions asked. So obviously if your question's at the top, more chance it's going to get answered. Sometimes we answer the questions in plenty of time and there's no more questions. Now I'm suspecting, because it's been a 6-month gap, there will be a lot of questions. And one of the things, if you've been watching on the Steam announcements, we did put out a call to ask you for your questions in advance. And we got a few in. And so we're going to ram those in at the start before we open the floor for what I would like to call live fire questions and answers. But before any of that, because it's 6 months, I just want to give you a very quick and not very accurate rundown of what's been happening since I think it was the June or the July broadcast. So lots happened since then, and I just wanted to fill you in. And certainly if you're not like a constant frequenter of the Discord channel, this may have escaped your notice. But you'll notice on screen, Dirt Basic Software Limited. I don't know if you're really, if you are that 8-bit coder, you probably know this and what this actually refers to. About April of this year, I personally bought all the game making IP from TGC, the Game Creators Limited, and then created a new company called Dirt Basic Software Limited. Not really a new company. I first founded this company in 1999 for the direct purpose of selling a product called Dirt Basic, which was a little game maker programming language that allowed you to create 3D games very quickly in the basic syntax. And it was very good. Created a website, sold it from the website, burned CDs myself, stuck the labels on and posted them out. So as you imagine, 1999, 26 years ago. When I obtained the IP, I wanted to have a vehicle where the IP could be supported, documented, have some sort of, let's call it a historical archive to hold it all together. And I couldn't think of a name. So let's just use the original name, Dirt Basic Software Limited. So that's why you're looking at this really basic website. As you can imagine, in the last, decade and a half, my primary role has been more on the management side of things. I'm still a member of TGC, but I'm now the chairman of TGC. But DBS, Dirt Basic Software Limited, is a extremely new and very small company, and I am the only employee of that company at the moment. Everything else that goes on within this new commercial vehicle is freelancers, contributors, satellites, etc., things like that. So it's just really me sitting in the middle of this tiny little company called Dirt Basic Software. But it's a great beginning. So as I said, this started around April. It's taken me about 6 months. I thought it would actually take about 3 weeks to set up a company, get all the paperwork sorted out and start moving. It's actually taken more like 6 months because I didn't realise just how many nuances existed to set one up. I kind of forgot 90% of what I did in 1999 when I set up the first company, and so it became as a nice surprise of all the things I'd forgotten and had to relearn to set up the company. The good news is it's pretty much done now. All the accounts are set up, all the new cloud services and systems and websites and backends and files and you name it, it's all set up under the new DBS banner. There might be a couple of things, low priority things that we can sort of sort out, but generally we're under the new umbrella now, which is great. So that gives you a bit of a background as to when you start reading DBS, or Dirt Basic Software. It isn't that we're going to revert back and start selling Dirt Basic, the programming language. It's simply just the name of the company that I first created in 1999 in order to learn how to be an entrepreneur and sell software, etc. But I thought it was a nice sort of harking back, and almost harking back to the original excitement of developing game makers and trying to create something unique into the market and try and make a difference. So it's got that element to it too. And it always puts a smile on my face when I see the logo that was created so long ago. So since June, there has been a couple of things. It's not an exhaustive list. If you've been watching like the GitHub commits, then you know exactly what's been going on. There's been a couple of bulletins and obviously a couple of engagements on Discord. So here's just a couple of the things. Bug fixes. Now, even 6 months ago, we was down to like 10, 20, 30 bugs on the issues board. And if you look at the bug count now, it's 8. Now, there are more than 8 bugs extant, which means there's bugs that we're still waiting for information before we can reproduce and then fix that particular bug. But in terms of bugs that haven't really started the process, there's only 8 left, which is really good. We do generally bounce between 10 and 20 now, because as we fix the 10 that's left, 10 or 15 new bugs get reported. I'm happy to say that they're becoming more edge case issues rather than core issues. Every now and again we do slip up and a massive error creeps into the dev test, and of course that needs fixing, but the good news is it gets fixed quickly, so we're on the case. And speaking to that, since April, or around April, I have recruited the help of Preben in an official capacity to help with these bug fixes. It won't stop him going off a tangent and creating cool new features and tools and all the rest of it, but we have secured his extremely excellent talents to focus his laser attention on bugs and fixing them. And you'll have seen that if you was looking at the commits month in, month out since April, May. I just had a quick look at stats, and in the last 6 months we've managed to fix and close 58 bugs. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's just the ones that are completely closed and weren't feature requests. In the previous 6 months it was 48. So since DBS was formed, we have fixed more bugs than previously, and that's also pretty cool in that there would have been more bugs 7 months ago or 10 months ago. We've fixed all of them. So imagine there's actually been kind of less bugs to go around, but we ended up fixing more of them. So I'm pretty pleased that we now have that resource permanently ensconced inside the DBS framework in order to knock out these bugs just as soon as they appear. And if you actually look at the issues board, nearly all of the bugs that you can find are all new ones. There aren't any bugs from 2024, 2025. There might be some bugs from, say, June or from February, but you'll usually find that most of the bugs are now from like November, December, maybe some from August. In terms of outside of the bug fixing, more like improvements or tweaks or small functional additions, you will have seen that across the board, because we can't help it. You know, we fix a bug and we think, oh, we can improve that. And there's always a lot of toing and froing from people who are really interested in seeing Max become an excellent game maker. And so we can't resist but adding a small functional improvement. They're all very subtle, but they don't really fall under the banner of a bug fix. Things like improvements to the combat AI. Once upon a time, it was literally just, you're a soldier, stand there and start shooting at me. Now you've got soldiers that can you can create cover, then the soldiers can find that cover and they can hide, either crouch down behind a low cover area or round a wall. They've got prone behaviours now, so they can dive into some grasses and shoot you from those grasses, so they're not stood up, they're actually sat down. And other areas like how it connects to patrolling, etc., all mixed in with that. So it's been one of those things that it's an ongoing battle, pardon the pun, to improve the combat AI. But the more we start adding these sort of, I won't say hard-coded, but fixed approaches to solving the issue of good combat, it became apparent that, you know, at some point we're going to have to make this modular and open it up so more people can add their own decisions on how a soldier should act and when they do this and when they do that. So we'll probably stop sort of hard coding in these strict behaviours, and we're going to start thinking about how we can make it a bit more modular. And I have a couple of really nice ideas how that can happen. But that's for the future, because as I said, we are still working on bug fixes. I know we've fixed a lot of bugs, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bugs since we said bug fixing is priority 1, 2 and 3, and the bugs are still there, so we're still going to fix them. But now we're at the point where the software needs to go from, okay, there's a handful of bugs left, and okay, it's pretty decent, but it still has stability issues. The performance isn't quite right. I'm not confident to make my game and sell it on Steam just yet. So these are the questions we need to answer, and they do fall into both continued bug fixing, but also just adding little bits of functionality to get you there. And I'm calling it a good version 1. I know we've left early access on Steam, and we've been selling this for years, and you think, well, surely it's version 1 by now. Not in my opinion. Now, I'm speaking on behalf of Dirt Basic Software Limited. I don't think we've got a good version 1 yet, and I want to keep working on it until we have that. What is a good version 1? Not only is it a product that really just doesn't fall over and finds it very difficult for you to make it fall over, but there's a couple of good games that have been made and released and are doing quite well out there in the world. As soon as we see all of that, I'm going to say, yeah, GameGuru Max is a good version 1. As I said, improvements across the board. You'll find some improvements into the storyboard as well. Pretty pleased with how we've been moving that one forward. Everything's usually all focused on that one level and making sure that one level works great. But really, a level is just a small component of your entire game. Your many levels, your screens that connect them, the menus, etc. And of course, that exported standalone that needs to work. So all of those needed small tweaks and improvements. As you might anticipate, there's going to be an official December update. So that will go out next week. So I'm going to put out a public preview of what we have. I'm just waiting on Preben's latest commit, and then we'll run that through an internal test. Once we're happy with that, then we will get it onto public preview, so you can play with that for a couple of days. And if there's no major issues, then that becomes the December update towards the end of next week, I think. In some other news, DLCs. Now, I know it wasn't overwhelmingly complaining on Steam that, why don't you spend more time fixing bugs and adding features instead of messing about with DLC? It was a misperception, really, that we didn't really create DLC, and we haven't for quite a while. We had like 3 DLCs out of the 60 DLCs that GameGuru Max was selling, but the messaging wasn't clear. So we thought, well, at the same time as getting rid of our DLCs and absorbing it into the core product, so we really, there's no excuse there. It's like, we haven't done any DLCs. We're not selling any DLCs. We haven't created any DLCs. We hand it all over to the third-party artist communities. So the only DLCs you see, we're just selling on behalf of those artists. And the other complaint that Steam came up with was the prices are a bit high. You can't sell a DLC for 30 quid if you paid 40 quid for the main product. It's not necessarily that the DLCs weren't worth £30. They're actually more like worth £70, £80 at minimum. But it's just the Steam economy. No one expects the DLC to be 75% the cost of the full product. And so you'll have noticed, or you might have noticed, that we've radically restructured the whole of the DLC scene. So as I said, we're not going to be making any DLCs. Dirt Basic Software is out of that. But we will help artists to sell their DLCs through our Steam portal. So that's something that we're going to do. We also improved the terms. So it was usually around 50-50 that we'd split back when it was TGC. But of course, the industry standard is a 70-30 split. So now we're giving all artists 70% of all the revenue. And the other 30%, believe it or not, doesn't even go to Dirt Basic Software. It literally gets paid out as commissions to the people who help prepare the Steam page, monitor the product, manages sales and promotions and bundles, and obviously processes the royalties and all the rest of it. So we're not making any money from the DLC, and we don't want to. Dirt Basic Software, I feel, needs to make its money from the core product, not its ancillary features. And let's face it, it's a good philosophy, because it means if we're just focused on the core product, that means we're not distracting ourselves, and we just stay, because it's a small team, you want to be focused. So we're going to focus on the game engine. And so we're going to look to make our fortune from that one thing. The DLCs and the add-on tools and all the rest of it, we're going to leave that to the community, and we're going to support the community in bringing those to as many people as possible in the next couple of years. So that's really a very quick and dirty summary of what's happened over the last 6 months. I'm sure there's a lot I've missed out. And the last thing I want to mention, because I'm sure it's on everyone's mind right now, is we have actually started the DirectX 12 work. Let me tell you what that is. Right now, GameGuru Max runs under DirectX 11, and it does quite a decent job. It absolutely maximizes the DirectX 11 architecture to get out of it as much as possible. But here's the problem. DirectX 11 won't be supported forever. In fact, we've already started to see some sort of driver versions come out that I don't know whether it's done on purpose or not, but they don't really work brilliantly with DX11. Work great with DX12 apparently, but who wants to be fixing old DirectX 11 bugs, etc.? And that's kind of the problem. At some point, DX11 is just not going to be viable with brand new graphics cards coming out. So we need DX12 at some point, and so that work has started. Fortunately, we're backed by an excellent graphics engine called Wicked Engine, and Wicked Engine has already done the hard work of creating the abstraction under DX12. So the graphics engine already exists. We just need to glue Max to that DX12 version of the Wicked Engine. And there are a couple of gotchas, and we're going to get to that a little later when I read off the pre-prepared questions and answers, because some of the questions that were submitted directly relate to the DX12 work. But I just wanted to mention before we get on to that part of the Q&A that the DX12 process has started. It's looking good. The first time I tried to do the DX12 port, I went a completely different way, and it was an absolute, not a mess, but it was a lot of work, a lot of donkey work, replacing practically every other line. And then at the end of that process, I discovered that there was a single hash define that Janos provided in the Wicked Engine that literally just flipped the script, and all of the old Wicked function calls were automatically treated as the new function calls. It just means a lot less work the second time around. But there are a couple of gotchas, and I'll cover them shortly. In fact, right now. But before that, I just want to check the Q&A, because what I have done, I've been rabbiting on for 20 minutes. I haven't even looked at the chat. And if everyone says, Lee, we can't hear you from 15 minutes ago, oops. But it looks like everything's going nice. Scrolly, scrolly, scrolly. Okay. So no disasters. Nothing is burning. I guess we can carry on. So as I said, that was the first part. I just wanted to give you a quick overview. And remember, this is a live broadcast, so you can ask your questions. If I've missed something, throw that question at me. If you want me to demonstrate something in GameGuru Max, I have GameGuru Max open right now. The reason Island Showdown is listed and front and center is I always use that demo to test every dev test. It's just I know that island like the back of my hand now, but I'm sure you're sick of watching that really crap website, the Basic Limited website. It really was just a placeholder. That one that you saw was knocked up in about 20 minutes. I have a CMS backend which allows me to create more elaborate web pages. I'm also going to fold in pages for all the old products going back to 1999. It's almost like a web page version of that excellent documentary created by Scott Tanner. And with his permission, I'd even like to put a link to that documentary on the Dirt Basic website, because it really tells an excellent narrative all the way through, and we'll have web pages for each of those products. And probably most of the web pages should be able to have a link to that product, so you can download it for nostalgia's sake and have a bit of a play. I think all of them still run on Windows, which is quite amazing. So as I said, we asked for some questions to be posted to us, and we got some. In fact, we got 8. So I'm going to read them out verbatim, and I'm just going to read out the answer that I wrote underneath in the same style. Obviously, these questions are completely biased to the person asking the question, which is fine. And I'm just going to get through them. And of course, if you want any more clarification on these answers, that's what the live fire Q&A will be for. So let's crack on through these. And the first 5 are from Tom. That's Blood Moon Interactive. Some really good questions. Had me to pause and think about a few of them. and then 3 at the end, which were submitted after we asked for questions. I guess a lot of people didn't want to pre-ask a question because they wanted the opportunity to blast it live and then try and wrong foot me, which is fine. So I'll just read out these questions and answers, and you can ask some follow-up questions if you like or are intrigued by the question and or answer. So question 1. Given that DevTest serves as an important source of bug reports from the community, what regression testing processes are in place to catch issues before features reach DevTest? Are there plans to implement more systemic testing or perhaps a closed beta program or checklist to reduce the frequency of breaking changes that can halt project development? Great question. A lot of people are on the DevTest build and then we break it and suddenly you can't carry on working on your project. I'm sure it is quite upsetting. For people who are in the situation where they are going to get upset because they are working on something important, I would recommend you revert to the public updates. Now, this could be a follow-on question that I'm happy to do that, but could you make the public updates more regular? That's an absolutely good counter to what I've just said, and that's absolutely fine. But to speak to the core of the question, the dev test is our tester. The dev test has a great place because actually 10% of our current community use the dev test. It's the perfect test bed. Once we have done something, we don't just change some code and immediately throw it on dev test. We change some code and we test it ourselves, or whoever's doing the contribution does the testing, and then once that's been merged with something else and it's been checked at least twice, then it goes on to the dev test. So all of the sort of extra precautions are done before you see it on dev test. But there's never a guarantee that once it's on dev test it's going to be solid. That's why we call it the dev test. There's always the possibility it will break something, and sometimes it does. So if you're on a critical path of developing something, my recommendation at the very least, go on the public preview, because at that point we're pretty happy that we're not going to break anything for you, because that's the version that is the precursor to the live public update that we put out. So yeah, the dev test at the moment encompasses all of those precautions. Perhaps down the road we can add some more sophistication, but right now it's a very small contributed community. That is people like Necrim and Preben, you know, who are doing a lot of commits every week. And so it's a very small development effort. So we don't really need a lot of bureaucracy in order to manage that. But perhaps in the future, maybe as it scales up, we will need some more formality in how we approach different flavors and varieties of test builds. Question number 2. The DirectX 12 update, this is what I referred to earlier, has generated a lot of excitement in the community. Could you help set realistic expectations about what this update will and won't deliver? Specifically, will the DX12 update enable improvements to the physics systems such as player friction, buoyancy, or more realistic object interactions? If physics improvements aren't part of this update, what would be required to achieve those features? So that's probably a 2-part question. So really, just to head things off, all of the things that we're planning for DX12, in principle, are literally the latest Wicked engine. So if you go to the latest Wicked engine, I think it's wickedengine.net, and just check out all the cool features that have been added in the last 2 years, that's our shopping list. What we're doing right now is what's called a prototype, where not only are we trying to get that version to compile and run a DX12 version of GameGuru Max, but during that process, there'll be some stuff that just drops in, that probably improves sky and clouds and weather and stuff like that, and stuff that's not as straightforward to drop in. And the prototype will allow us to figure out what we can take from the shopping list that's easy and things that we're going to have to just leave to one side. And to the second part of that question, the good news is, because of the way I want to do it this time, which is when we used the Wicked engine the last time with the DX11 Wicked engine, we heavily modified The Wicked Engine. I mean, we didn't rewrite it, but my God, we had a lot of let's call them hacks, just to do the things we wanted to do. And we weren't happy with the functionality of Wicked, wanted to push certain areas further with sometimes pretty ropey code, usually my fault. But the problem was, once we'd hacked in all of our custom stuff, it wasn't easy to then grab the latest version of the Wicked engine and merge it in with GameGuru Max. We'd hacked about with it too much. This time, the goal is, and this is our preset, we're going to start from, is there a way in which we can keep tapping into the latest version of the Wicked engine without us having to modify it in any way? So it's basically a drop-in, compile, and you immediately get the benefits of whatever the Wicked engine improvement was. That's the idea. And because of that, one of the things we have to do, and I think it's a good have to do, is replace our current physics engine, which was Bullet, and it'll be replaced with a physics engine called Jolt. Now, I've heard good reports of Jolt. Obviously, it repeats all of the stuff you'd expect from a physics engine, but apparently it's very fast. So it means you can do a lot more moving of physics objects around your level by tapping into the full resources of your system. So I'm really excited to see what Jolt offers at a baseline, and then obviously all the extra things that it can bring. Because it's already been built into the latest Wicked engine. All we've got to do is delete Bullet and then supplant all of the stuff that we want Max to do with those Jolt function calls. Could be straightforward, or it could be an absolute can of worms. But that's what the prototyping is about. Question number 3. There's been some concerns in the community about upcoming terrain system changes as a result of DX12 and whether they might affect existing projects, even those developed in the retail branch. Can you clarify what compatibility considerations are being made and whether developers should expect any migration process or breaking changes to current projects? Anyone who's been sticking around with GameGuru long enough knows the pain of that, especially when we moved from GameGuru Classic to GameGuru Max. There was this sort of forward compatibility pain as some of the things you created in Classic just didn't work in Max. To name one example, characters. The character creator in Classic produced an entirely different and alien character, so it could never ever be used in Max because we rewrote the entire character creator. We called it Character Creator Plus, and the main feature of the new one is that instead of having separate objects that just happen to float around in the relative vicinity, so the head was always separate, in GameGuru Max we glued all the meshes into one object. So it literally, the character was just one object when we'd finished, which was an improvement. But that was a bridge too far, and we couldn't move the clunky old characters from Classic into the nice shiny new Max version, which was the right decision. So yeah, the 3 things we've identified so far is terrain, trees, and grass. The reason is the terrain, the trees, and the grass in the current DirectX 11 of GameGuru Max were custom created. They did not exist in the Wicked engine that we use. We had to create it, and we created all the shaders from scratch as well. This was, when I say we, I did hardly anything. It was Paul from TGC who did an excellent job. It still works really well. I mean, it's impressive stuff, but it's completely incompatible with the DirectX 12 engine, because you can't run DX11 and DX12 in the same graphics pipeline, so it has to be binned. However, you still want to be able to take your terrain and your grass and your trees and stuff and still have it work in DX12. So this is what I think we're going to settle on. We retain what's called basic data. So the shape of your terrain, the textures that's on the terrain, where the trees are, and the grass areas. That basic data will be retained, but what new system uses that basic data will be completely different. It will be the Wicked engine's contribution to these areas. The new Wicked engine has a terrain system now. It has an excellent grass system using the Her Particles approach, and I think it also has some decent tree management. Now, I've been pretty happy with our tree system because, as you've seen in the Island Showdown screenshot, The trees have been rendered all the way back to the most distant mountain. I haven't checked out the details of how trees are done in the latest Wicked engine. I'm hoping, even though it's not like a like for like, that you can have that many tree objects, and the tree right at the back is just an imposter, just a little quad that just takes up zero performance or rendering performance. That's my hope. So that's the approach we're going to make. We're going to keep basic data so you can migrate some of your stuff over to the new DX12, but expect changes. Changes for the better, ultimately, but there will be that growing pain where your world, your level, doesn't look the same as it did in the DX11 version of GameGuru Max. So question number 4. Since the transition to DBS, the community was hopeful that more independence would lead to increased engagement, more frequent live streams, developer updates, community interactions. However, I've seen the opposite, with live streams now happening less frequently than under the TGC. Can you speak to what's preventing more regular community engagement and whether there are plans to increase the frequency of these touch points with the community? Well, when it was under TGC, and we have to go back a bit, go back to when TGC was primarily developing and publishing game making tools. It was a very different market. That is to say, you could actually build a business on that business model. You could actually make a game maker tool and then sell it and build a community around it. You can't do that now. If you tried, you'd find it very difficult indeed. Why? Because the market's grown and it's evolved into a situation where you don't need to buy a product. You know, it's often mentioned on some of the Steam reviews, just get Unity, it's free. Just get Unreal, it's free. Just get Godot, it's free. Right? So you're in a marketplace, you've got a stall next to 3 other banana sellers. All 3 banana sellers are giving away their bananas and you're having to sell your bananas. It's not a great business model. So it has changed a lot. And obviously at some point TGC made the business decision that it really just wasn't a viable direction to go in. Fortunately, TGC was kind of multifaceted, so we had a lot of irons and a lot of fires, and about 10 years ago, or thereabouts, we collaborated with our publisher to create a little app which teaches people how to pass their theory test in the UK for driving. It is now just been awarded Apple's #1 paid app 8 years in a row. TGC have done very well out of that success. And in contrast to the diminishing returns of selling game makers in this new economy, it was a no-brainer. And so DBS was created to incubate and continue the support for all those game makers, and that's why I did it. That's why I bought the IP. I wanted all of that work to be preserved, and for the active products like App Game Kit Studio, Basic Classic, GameGuru Classic and GameGuru Max, I wanted a vehicle where we could continue to support that work. The expectation, the perception, I don't know what you would call it, that as soon as DBS took over, we'd ramp up more activity, more resources, more this, more that, more the other. No, not at all. In fact, TGC was subsidising the work to continue the support on the game makers. When I took over, it was very clear that there was more going out than coming in. In fact, DBS, since taking on incorporation and then doing all the setup work and then running this support, etc., it's been running at a complete loss. In fact, there was only 1 month in 7 where it just broke even. But apart from that, it's not a business. I mean, if you ran this as a business, you'd be getting nasty phone calls from your bank manager. Fortunately, I'm able to sort of supplement some of the losses, because I am passionate about making sure that these IPs survive and the potential of GameGuru Max is realised. That's why I'm spending my own money to sort of keep this thing going. And I'm fully confident that once, like I said, we get to that good version 1, resources will no longer be a problem. Great thing about software is once you've written it once and it's the right product and it's a good product, it will sell itself. You don't really need a lot of marketing once you've got a great product. It'll literally sell itself. It will grow its own user base. And the great thing about software is you write it once, you can sell it 1,000,000 times. So the potential's there. We just need to make sure the product is right. So I'm not worried about bankrolling Databasic software and the GameGuru Max development, because I can see where it's going, and there is a space in the market for a product like GameGuru Max, which doesn't insist that you have to code at some point. GameGuru Max will allow you to go all the way through the process of making a game and sell it, and you never have to touch a line of code. And if you use Unity and Unreal, even things like blueprints, you kind of have to almost have code level understanding if you're going to create game logic with blueprints. And I think Godot dropped the version of blueprints because it's like, no, we'll just go back to code, we'll just go back to scripting. So yeah, there is going to be a place for something like GameGuru Max, and so that's why I'm passionate about continuing this adventure and seeing where it leads us. As just speaking to the second part about what's happening with community interactions, etc., that will come. Right now, I'd say we're still in the development phase. So any sort of back and forth with the community, it really is just a case of telling you what bugs we've fixed, what prototypes we're working on, what subtle functionality improvements we have, and if anyone wants to come into the GitHub repo and help us contribute and make tweaks and improve things, that's great. But we're still in that sort of, I don't know what we call it, the skunk works mode, where we're really trying to stay away from the world and just get this thing finished. And then once it's finished and we're all happy with it, we've seen a couple of games made with it, then yes, then we can expand out to a proper regular community activity with a user base size that justifies, say, running promotions and running competitions and bulletins every week or 3 times a week and an active YouTube channel, etc. But I say, let's get this product right first and spend all our energy on that. Question number 5. Community, and this I may have crossed over into question 5, but who knows. Community energy and engagement seems tied closely to perception of development momentum. What can you share about the development pipeline that might help reassure the community that GGM, GameGuru Max, has a strong future ahead? Well, that really is, I've just sort of hinted at it, but what we are going to do is, because not everyone goes onto the GitHub repo issues board and scours the commits and what's going on there, and I don't think people have discovered there's a tab here, tab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Look at this tab, live changelog. We added this, I don't know, about 6 months ago, 8 months ago. Rather than have to create a continual barrage of information, anytime you run GameGuru Max, just go to live changelog. This is an up-to-date list of anything that's been changed in the code. It's not been edited by an editor. It's literally just a dump of whichever contributor has made a commit to the repository. You can't get more up to date than that. You don't have to wait each month for a bulletin. Just look at this page. You get exactly what's been going on. However, Dave, one of our helpers, our little helpers, has said he's going to prepare a monthly summary from this raw data that everyone gets to read each month. Just sort of clue people in who don't necessarily want to look at commits, but they would like a summary of what's been going on. So we'll be adding that from January onwards, and hopefully that should sort of plug the gap so there isn't this perception of slow development momentum. Like I said earlier, with the increase in bug fixes, momentum in development has increased. It's just the communication of that momentum probably wasn't there if people didn't know where the live changelog tab was. Question the 6. Will we ever see user-made plugins available for GameGuru Max? Things that add or change things within the engine itself as opposed to just user-made assets. We already have it. It's called GitHub. It's literally the repository you can grab right now, download a clone of it, make some changes, submit those changes, we'll look at them. If we like them, they become part of the product. So you don't have to go through some sort of abstraction layer of editor plugin stuffs. You can go straight to the meat. Add anything you want. You don't have to sort of wait until some extra plugin commands have been added. You can go straight down to C++ if you want to. Now that's a bit of a shoddy answer. It's like, well, do it yourself. I kind of know what you're fishing for. It's like, can we have the Blender style plugin system where you just drop in a couple of files, those files are like in Lua or something, and it basically incorporates into the engine in such a way that it adds new editor features, like you might want a little sound editor or a model assembler or a CSG function within the level editor itself, things like that. Sure, but I think that comes later. As I said, I think it's about getting a good version 1. And with access to the full repo, if anyone really wants to, we fully encourage that. But adding another layer of, right, this is a sub-language for the editor plugins, I think that if we ever do it, will be coming later. Question 7. Are you going to make enhancements to let users create and play multiplayer titles like Deathmatch and CTF, that's Capture the Flag? There are no plans to create multiplayer in Max. I loved saying that. I've been saying that for 3 years now, and every live broadcast, that question, I've headed it off for this one. And I'm sure I'll see it in the chat. But people posting that question now do it tongue in cheek. And question 8, are you going to introduce a third person view? There are no short-term plans to create third person game controls in Max. I modified the there are no plans because we're so close to doing third person now. It would be silly to say we have no plans because it's tantalizingly close. But there's no short-term plans. I refer you to my previous statement. Let's get a good version 1 that doesn't have third-person controls. Once we have that, and a couple of games have gone out the door, yes, people will want third-person games. There's a lot of third-person games out there, and we'll want GameGuru Max to produce those kinds of games. But as I said, let's get a good version 1 with what we've got. Every time you add a feature, you add 5 bugs. So you can do the math. We want to get to 0 bug count. So those are the questions I've got on my sheet. So I've moved that to one side. And now we get to the bit everyone's been waiting for. We've done that including the summary, 45 minutes. So by my calculation, we've used half of our live broadcast for those pre-questions. Now my question to you before we get into the live fire Q&A, for our next broadcast, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but we are scheduling 2 more live broadcasts, one in June or July and then one in December of 2026. You let me know if you want another pre-questions and pre-answers section to the live broadcast. I do feel like I've just been rambling for 40 minutes. Or whether you want to give that time over to live questions. So basically after a summary and maybe some demos, I think by then we've got some really nice games we can show you. Some early sneak peek previews of things that people have been working on for quite a while in GameGuru Max and have just been waiting for that, as I said, that level of solid stability where you can publish what you've made. Do you want to just spend that rest of the time doing live fire Q&A? Please let me know. Okay, so just looking at my screen, let's have a nice pretty picture. There you go, something interesting to look at. I'm going to go to my chat and I'm going to go to the top. Sorry, Maverick Media, your question is like last. So hopefully we'll get to yours, but hopefully we don't have a lot of cues to go through. Looks like we got to the top. I don't know what this little King 1, King 2, King 3 are. I think it's like the first people to post. Is that a thing? Are we doing a thing? Okay, let's find some questions. How are you doing? I'm doing very fine. Thank you very much. And yeah, just to set some timing on this, we're currently 7:57. Let's keep doing live questions until 8:40. Yeah, 8:40. Okay. Someone let me know in the chat when we get to 8:40. Let's find the first question, shall we? And the first question... Guinness? No Guinness here, I'm afraid. I have 8 cans of Guinness non-alcoholic, but they've been sitting in the fridge for a couple of months. I don't know why. Okay, second pint. I even had the first pint. So we'll just find a question mark. I don't want to delay the opportunity to get as many answers out in the next, what would it be, 40 minutes? Okay, 42. Yeah, Bloodmoon Interactive. It could be, you know. I'll do a 42-minute hypnotic intro for the June broadcast. No, I don't think anyone would tolerate that. And anyone who knows what we're talking about is in the clique. Okay, so first question, please. And we have our first question. Weirdly, Maverick Media, who's asked the last question that I saw, and also the first question. I apologise if I've skipped anyone's question. I'm not sure you're going to get through to me. Maybe I'll just scroll quickly to the bottom in about 2 seconds and make sure that I've not missed someone. So this first question. Can you tell us anything about improvements to real-world physics we can look forward to in the future? I appreciate and understand that these questions are so early. They came before the 8 fixed questions. We're just going to have to deal with that. But what I'll do, I'll repeat the answers, maybe a more concise reinterpretation of the original answer, just so we don't blasely skip things. Real world physics. Well, the Jolt physics engine that we'll be replacing in DX12, apparently it's faster, which means you can have more nuance. For example, up to now you haven't had cloth physics. It's just too performance intensive. Maybe with Jolt you can actually have some cloth floating around. What I mean by cloth, obviously capes on the back of characters, cloth drapes over doorways so you can push through them, ropes or things dangling off trees or other objects. So with increased performance you get to do more physics in your level. And I think as you run through a level, we're all kind of not sick, but we're kind of blasé now about fixed, rigid, solid objects that just don't move. You want your game world to be completely flowing with activity, particles, objects that move, physics-related objects like a rope bridge that moves realistically. Water, that when you walk into it, it sort of pushes a tide backwards and forwards, things like that. So I'm optimistic that with Jolt and that increased performance, we get to do some cool things that we can look forward to. But nothing planned until we've actually seen what happens in the prototype phase of DX12. And just to sort of clarify, it's not backwards compatible. Once we switch to Jolt, that's just fixed to the DX12 build. There'll probably be a final build of DX11, and that will still be using Bullet. Okay, next question. Question mark. No question mark. But Era 1299 asks, when Blood System gets an upgrade? It already has. The Blood System now uses the Wicked Particle system. So if you shoot a character, those are real volumetric particles that are spewing out. And there are settings at the back end where you can actually control what that particle does. And I think Preben's even created a particle editing tool where you can create basically any particle effect and then attach it to the response when you shoot a character. So that already exists. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go on Discord and have an ask, and you'll get a response pretty quickly. Okay, spotty. Next question would be, Mate Game says Jolt is good. I hope so. Maverick Media asks, can I get an explanation how to create new animation sets for character creator characters to use at present? If I add a new set to the animation folder, the characters won't recognize the set. Yeah, that's super tech, isn't it? At the moment, that's not something you can just do via the UI, you know, going into Max and just pressing a few buttons. It requires knowledge of the file folder distribution at the back end of Max, what the files need to be named, what's in the files, the other files that are related to that. Now, there has been some attempt to add that information to the guides, but this is pretty specialized knowledge, and not everyone is setting out to create not just animations, but animations that are then compatible with the character creator. But it's a great question, and I do want to plug that knowledge gap. The best thing, I think, Maverick Media, is to ask me those questions via email, lee@darkbasic.com, and as I answer them, I'll also improve the guide, so those answers are then available to everyone. It's not impossible. For example, all the animation sets that are already there were created and made compatible with the character creator. So the process exists, but it's definitely not as documented as I would like, and your question proves that. Okay, Jolt is awesome. It's just gone from good to awesome. And apparently used by Godot. Cool. Oh, gold. It's a translation moment. GameGuru un programa. Programming complicado. Para desarrollar de video educativos. I don't speak. Is it Spanish? Oh, if someone could translate El Tenebros's question, that would be awesome. Maybe pop a question mark in there, so I know it's a translated question. Oh no, it's just been translated. GameGuru, a complicated program for developing educational video games. Yeah, it is complicated. Game making is complicated. Don't think game making is just sitting down, bashing the keyboard for 5 minutes, and you've now got a game that will beat Grand Theft Auto 5. It actually requires some work, and there are a million sub-levels. All of them can get very complicated. But I would say compare the complication of making a shooter game in GameGuru Max with making a shooter game in Unity from scratch, and then come back and complain how complicated GameGuru Max is. That's all. I'll leave it at that. I think you'll find we're slightly less complicated than writing a game completely from scratch in code. Right, another question. This is from Spicy Sausage. Does GGM internally handle instancing of objects or characters currently? Any plans to expand capabilities there for performance games? Yes, we already heavily use instancing, so 2 objects that are the same next to each other get batched in the Wicked engine. In the latest version of the Wicked engine on the DX12, that is improved even further. So expect some future improvements on instancing of objects in DX12, but we already use instances of objects in DX11. As I said, we squeezed the DX11 engine quite hard to get as much performance as we could out of it. Best game engine ever? Well, that's biased, but thank you very much. Or maybe you were speaking of Godot. Okay, looking for a question. I think we're getting quite at the end of this this chat, actually, which means we get to end at 1 hour and 30 minutes. Remember, that's the official time for the length of this live broadcast. The extra 30 minutes we can tag on is entirely discretionary. So get your questions in before I hit the bottom of this chat. Buildzer has just spammed the chat. Yes, what are they do? Yes, said, but literally, what was that? I'm not sure that constitutes a question, so we'll move on to Maverick Media. Any thoughts on adding texture and/or object streaming? Great question, because I have a great answer to that. In the latest version of the Wicked engine under DX12, one of the last things that was added, say in the last 6 months, proper texture streaming. So for those who don't know, what is texture streaming and why do I care? One of the big problems when you do a level with lots of stuff in it isn't necessarily the amount of geometry you've got. That's pretty... You know, most graphics cards are capable of pushing millions of polygons. That's fine. Where you're going to get some performance hits, and what I mean by that is stuttering. You're running along at 60 FPS, manning your own business, you turn a corner and it goes and it drops to 10 FPS, then 40, and back up to 60. And you think, what the smeg was that? Suddenly your game doesn't feel slick and smooth anymore. It was because the graphics card just had to grab a load of textures and move it into the cache to be rendered onto the screen. And the problem is, if you've already filled up your video memories caches with the textures that are already on your screen, not just textures in front of you, but textures half a mile away, you're going to get that performance stuttering a lot. What texture streaming does, it works out what textures need to be high quality and right in your face, and which textures can be really small, like mid-level 12, and off into the distance. And it populates your graphics card with just the right size of texture that you need for where you are standing at that particular moment. It drastically reduces the amount of texture thrashing that goes on your graphics card, so you can actually have a 4GB video memory graphics card that can run super slick and smooth, even if your level is crammed with lots of high resolution textures. Texture streaming's really cool. We was going to add it to DX11 and then realise, wait a minute, it's already been added to the DX12 one. So let's just wait until the DX12 one and we get it for free. So you're going to get texture streaming if we can pull off the DX12 version of GameGuru Max. As to object streaming, that's something completely different. Let's find out if we even need it, right? The only thing I think you'd need object streaming, and to a larger degree terrain streaming, is if you've got a massive open world. That is to say, it's not 5 levels in your game, it's one level that's 500 kilometers across. At that point, there'll be so much geometry to deal with, you will have to sort of stream in that geometry as you get closer. I think one of the later versions of Unreal, I think they call them cells or something like that, that they impose to sort of quadrant off different sections of your massive level and then stream them in when you need them. But in my experience, geometry has never really been the problem, it's the textures. So if we had texture streaming and all the stuttering goes away and you can have a 500 kilometer level and no one's complaining, that is, the CPU's not complaining, the memory's not complaining, the graphics card's not complaining, why would you need to optimize? So let's do texture streaming and see where we are. But it will be fun to play with object streaming if we need it. Looking for the next question. Okay, so Era 1299, sword fight or any fighting game needs a good blood splash and body system. I asked if there will be any upgrade for current system. There's no upgrade on the current particle system for emitting blood splashes, and that's pretty versatile. As to a body system, that is when you hit like an arm and the arm falls off, or you hit a hip or a leg and then that character kind of gets pushed back in that zone. There are no plans for that, but I think as we go and refine our features, certainly in melee combat, and certainly when we do third person, or if we do third person, then we'll want that kind of stuff. And especially if we've got like a Jolt physics engine, which allows us to do that pretty cool and easily, then it would be a no-brainer just to drop that one in as well. So no plans, but we're kind of on the cusp. Oh, Budza. Okay, thanks. Explaining, and we continue. Okay, I mean zombie games need a good gameplay. You'll find in GameGuru Max, if you're a newcomer, we have a lot of zombies. In fact, in our example game, these are little hub demos. Whether these survive the DX12, there has been a big call in the community to sort of get rid of all of this providing little demos and making the product feel like a toy. Let's get rid of everything and make it like a prosumer title, and we don't need all these demos. I'm not really convinced of it, but perhaps some of these can be improved and maybe removed if they don't hit the mark. But I can tell you right now that nope. Yeah, Foggy Forest has zombies. Escape from Zombie Cellar has a zombie. Jungle Fever has a zombie. Mystery of Zed Island, Z for zombie. And Trapped has zombies. So you can see, we do have a lot of zombie logic. and some demos to prove zombie logic. There are no plans to add more zombification features at this time. The reason is we got so many zombies and we got so many soldiers, and we have so much of not very much else. We don't have any wizards, we don't have any barbarians, we don't have any aliens, we don't have all the other characters, contemporary characters from the 1920s, characters from the 1960s, characters from the future. We have very little of those. It'd be nice to kind of have a nice spread of all these different things. So we'll probably put zombie on pause until we've got a couple of different categories filled. Not that we don't like zombies, but I think we've probably got enough zombies to be getting on with. Another question from Spicy Sausage. Is GitHub the best way to ask for and discuss features? Yes, actually. I mean, you could go on Discord and says, I want this, I want that, and then the conversation moves on to something else. If you create an issue in the issues board that says, I want this, this is what inspired me, here's some screenshots, this is how it might work, and what is required and what isn't required, a nice thorough post, we'll mark it up as a max feature request. That way it doesn't get lost. Here's the best part. People can contribute to that issue. Once it's been posted, anyone can contribute ideas, refinements, suggesting whether it's a high or low priority right there and then. It contextualizes that feature request and it allows the community to contribute to it. So it really is the best place if you have an idea for new features. Just a word of warning, the feature list for GameGuru Max, I stopped counting at 1,000. So yeah, that's right. We've got 8 bugs left and 1,000 feature requests. It just goes to show how amazingly diverse a game maker has to be. That we have been working on this for 3 years plus, and there are still 1,000 features that people would like to see in the product. Sure, it certainly gives you some longevity if the longevity of a product is measured by how long it takes you to add every feature that everybody ever wanted ever. It's like I said before, it's a very hard business model to go to your bank manager and say, I want to set up a company and I want to do a game maker. If that bank manager knows anything, say, no, you're not doing that. That's insane. Do something easy like a game. Okay, next question would be... Oh, I've just done a jump. Sorry about that. You're going to have to scroll up a little bit, or a lot of bit. Oh, God. Might have to scroll up quite a lot. Yeah, that's good. Got it right to where I need to be. Spicy Sausage, multiplayer when? Smiley face with tongue hanging out. I will not treat you to an answer. I've answered that one. Any chance VR will eventually work better? Any chance? Yes, there is a probability that VR will eventually work better. That won't be the standard. There are no plans to XYZ. We added VR. It's currently in an experimental mode under developer settings. It's fun, but it's certainly in no state to make and sell a VR game. I would call it, yes, it's ready to make VR games when it can knock out a game with this equivalent kind of functionality of Half-Life Alyx. That's where I would be happy, and it's nowhere near that yet. So we're going to call it experimental and a bit of fun. But because it's in the product, there is a very good chance it will get improved over time. But it's nowhere near on the priorities list. Question from Maverick Media. There's still a place for sprites in game making. Any chance of getting closer to the functionality that Classic had regarding sprites? So GameGuru Classic had functionality of doing sprites. I assume, I mean, you please correct me, that GameGuru Max does everything Classic could do with sprites. I've seen a lot of very interesting... I've even seen full 2D games being written in Lua, running in an arcade machine in GameGuru Max. So, are we talking about a full set of sprite programming language style commands inside Lua, so you can do full 2D games? I don't see any reason why not, but as I said, I don't think that's on the priorities list right now, but I would be interested to know what Max is missing that Classic had, because I thought we just mapped over everything Classic did and then started adding. I didn't think we deleted anything. Obviously we deleted some old stuff, but we replaced it with something better. So had we deleted sprites, what did we replace it with? That's an interesting thought process there. Okay, possibly the DX12 version may run VR better by default, at least that's what I'm hoping. Yeah, the DX12 has the potential for performance improvements, but remember, all of the stuff that we want to do to render stuff to the screen that DX11 does, it's the same amount of content. So it's the same job. DX12 just does it in a different way. But the volume of work is still roughly the same. So sometimes you might see a performance improvement, but don't be surprised if you see a performance degradation in certain areas, as DX12 has to do it sort of the long way around, where DX11 was sort of hard coded to do it fast. Don't be surprised if you see symptoms like that. Spicy Sausage, will the development testing of a DX12 version, with the development testing of a DX12 version, what is the biggest benefit you see thus far by integrating DX12? Future compatibility for PCs. So when DX11 is discontinued, we've got DX12 and we can carry on running the product on the latest version of Windows for years and years and years. That's the biggest benefit. We're not doing DX12 because we'll get an extra 5% performance improvement. We may as well spend that same time adding features to DX11. Instead, if we don't do DX12, at some point, the last version of Windows that runs DX11 will be the last version of Windows you can run GameGuru Max on. And we're not planning to that shorter season. We do actually want to keep GameGuru Max running for years and years and years, and we're going to need DX12 version so we can run on whatever Windows turns into that only does DX12. I think it's called DX12 Ultimate, and it is years old. DX12, remember, this isn't like this new greatest latest thing. It's been sitting around for like 6 years waiting for people to support it. So that's the biggest one. That's the biggest benefit you'll see. Of course, the other biggest benefit, I'd say the next biggest one, and the one you probably notice. Who cares about longevity? We want to see new shiny toys. Well, that's the next biggest thing. With DX12, you get all of the latest things that Wicked Engine has done that we can't have at the moment because we're still on DX11. So that's the one you'll see as the biggest one. But for me, and the one that I think is the one that's the most seismic, is the fact that the product can continue to run 5 years from now without worrying about old DX11. RICKV, whoever that is. If anybody knows who RICKV is, please let me know. Use AI to make an auto report. Yeah, way ahead of you there. In fact, the summary that we did, we basically gave it a month's worth of GitHub commits and then asked it to create a summary, and it did. And then the summary was a bit too tech heady, so we just went back to AI and says, look, people aren't coders, just do it in sort of plain English, and it did us a better version. And then we passed it over to one of our editors who cleaned it up so it was more readable and structured, and then that's the version that we put out on the Steam announcements. When you use AI correctly, it is a great benefit. The problem with AI, and it's something that I think a lot of the old timers, let's say, in the industry, is that sometimes AI can overstep where it's good and where it's bad. So when it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's lunatic. I was testing out something called Grok Fast Code 1, I think it was called. It couldn't count brackets. I literally said, look, this won't compile. There's 3 brackets, it needs 2 brackets. There are only 2 brackets. I can literally count them. 1, 2, 3. I was copying out strings and giving it to the AI saying, count the number of brackets. There's now only 1 bracket. Absolutely insane. So right now, AI is great for the things it's great at, but if you trust it to do everything, it will mess you up badly. And so I think as time goes on, we will start using AI, but as a tool. The moment it steps over that mark into I'm going to do everything, we're going to be in trouble. And I am actually quite into AI. I kind of look at how AI can benefit in terms of productivity and things like that. And it's good to know. You know, you can know all about AI, but not necessarily use it all. So it's all about being informed about the current state of AI. And I would say the current state of AI in certain spheres is a complete mess. In other areas, it's excellent. And as mentioned, if you want to get like 45 pages of code commits and ask AI to summarize it down to 3 paragraphs, it does an excellent job. Especially if you give it the structure that you want it to follow, it does an even better job. So thanks for that suggestion. It's a great one, and we're already doing it. We like AI when it's a tool, and sometimes it can be a right tool. Okay, Spicy Sausage, in your opinion, what's the biggest area of opportunity for Macs to improve as an engine? I think it's about making game making more intuitive. That's the biggest opportunity. Not shinier graphics, faster this, faster that, smaller the other. It's about doing the things that all of the competitors don't do. With the competitor products I've already mentioned, you have to at some point dive into code, learn coding or at least scripting, and then chain together all the bits and pieces that a game needs in order to be a game, in order for you to be able to put out a game. Sometimes that can be dangerous. We've seen that with early GameGuru classic games, where it was basically just asset flip frenzy. Where basically it's like there was no thought put into it, and so everyone's game was the same demo with just a couple of objects changed over and a new title screen. So that's basically how it used to be, but that's not the way it has to be. What could happen is a way in which a product like GameGuru Max can be intuitive, but in such a way that your creativity comes through without having the prerequisite skills to create, you know, all the bits you need: the art, the sounds, the music, the narration, the logic. Logic is my kind of pet project. I always think logic. The other things you could probably knock out. Generative AI is a bit hit and miss at the moment. It's a bit spongy. But logic is the one that I think you can personalize the most. Think about it. If you drop in a soldier and it's using some stock combat logic, everyone else's game using the same stock combat logic, it's going to feel like somebody else's game. Oh, I feel like I've played this game before. And it kind of ruins it. You can change all the visuals and stuff, but when you see that logic repeat, it's like, oh, it's just the same logic. Wouldn't it be great if you had some way in which you can intuitively craft logic without using code, without using script, without using AI? Use AI, you don't understand what logic has been regurgitated. Some way in which you have full control of the design of that logic in an intuitive way. I think that is one of the biggest opportunities of Max. It allows you to kind of create these things yourself. You don't defer the creative process, but you kind of sideskip the need to spend 3 years becoming an expert in a particular area. So I think those are the big opportunities. GameGuru Max becoming that intuitive, powerful tool that lets your creativity translate into a game that then you can share and sell. Don't forget sell. Okay, next question. Would you consider integrating any open source APIs to add functionality? Yeah, the problem with integrating open source APIs is the moment you integrate those, some licenses then require that you then share and open source all of the source code it's connected to. Which is like, okay. Not all of them. A really good open source license is MIT. Their MIT license is like 3 sentences, which basically amounts to, do what you like with it, it's fine. So there already is some sort of, I wouldn't say open source, I've not looked into it, but there's certainly some things like Bullet that we've used for years, and ASIMP, Asset Importer, that we've used, and what else? The X Audio 2 for the sound. Basically, if you kind of look through the repo, it's like 5 or 6 third-party APIs that we plug into, because they do a much better job than if we had to write it from scratch. And the newest one will probably be Jolt, as we drop that one in. So we're kind of already in that bubble where we do bring in open source or commercially available APIs to sort of advance the functionality of GameGuru Max, so we don't have to write it all from scratch, which we could do if we wanted. Remember, our origins are 8-bit. We had to write everything from scratch back in the day, back when it was cobbles everywhere. Okay, next question from Spicy Sausage, who has probably got the record now for the most questions asked. Any further improvements or enhancements for workflow being planned that you can mention? Enhancements for workflow. My workflow or your workflow? I would say for my workflow, as I said, leaning more on AI tools that can improve productivity, like automatic building and testing, unit testing of dev tests. And that was mentioned earlier about, is there any sort of nuance in how you test things and builds before they go out to the general public, even if it is under the moniker of a dev test? Well, automated compiling and unit testing by AI is a great thing to do, because it means anything silly that was done gets caught by a unit test and immediately reported back to the person who contributed that part onto the repo. So there are some improvements that I am looking at, simply because with a small team and an even smaller company, you have to work smarter, not harder. And now with the advent of AI tools, we have the ability to do that, to work very smart without needing lots and lots of people going over the motions. It leaves the humans free to work on all the clever and creative stuff. Okay, and just to finish up that question, because I didn't read all the way to the end. So in brackets, prefabs, materials, file formats, I'm not sure about prefabs. I have a couple of thoughts on prefabs, actually, but I won't speak more on that unless there's a more direct question. Materials and file formats. I think we're pretty good on covering file formats, because we've covered all the main ones. And if we haven't covered them, just convert whatever image you've got into one of those file formats and you're fine. We do support all the top 3D ones, so FBX, GLTF, X-File. All that eventually get converted to our proprietary DBO format. And I think we support OBJ for static meshes as well. So if we're missing any out, and remember, I think ultimately everyone's going to be using GLTF2, because it really is a great 3D file format. So there's something we're obviously missing. Definitely drop a line in Discord or put it down as a feature request in the issues board. Okay. Okay, Spicy Sausage says all his questions were from Steam. Yeah, in our announcement, on the Steam announcement, and maybe this is why people are banging their keyboards now. It's like, where's my question? It's in that announcement we asked that they were submitted to chris@dirtbasic.com. If they were just posted on Steam, it's very likely they were ignored. Sorry about that. So here's a question from Banana Hammock 924. I think this is your first question. Sorry if it's your second. Are there any features that make collaborating with others on a project more easy? Any features that make collaboration with others more easy? GameGuru Max is very much a single person, single user experience. There's no features in the product that enable things like multi-user or sharing and collaborating on a project. It's very much an offline experience. The only online part is obviously having to log into your Steam account every 2 weeks so it doesn't shut down, and obviously access to things like Workshop and the live changelog where you need internet access. But generally it is an offline game maker, enabling you to sort of get the update and switch off your internet and just work on your game. I have another of my pet projects. Like I said, I do want to sort of play around with the idea of an intuitive, non-coding way to design and create and expand logic. But yeah, it's such a pet project. It's driven out the question, because I really do want to sort of see where I could go with creating this idea of custom logic. Any other features that make collaborating with others? Yes. My other pet project, but yes, my brain is civilized enough to sort of push it down the road. Multi-user. Think about it. You're in a project, you know, making a game. It's no longer a case of one guy sitting in his bedroom knocking out a little 2D game. Projects can be massive, requiring large teams and relatively large collaborations to knock out a really decent game. Wouldn't it be great if, let's say you went into your project, and as soon as you're in here, you get a little list of people up in the top right, all the people collaborating on your project. Think of it like Google Docs, where you get to see like lots of cursors moving up and down and around and adding and deleting and stuff like that, but done on a game project basis. So at any time, you could be on your own, or someone has logged in because they're adding some levels or playing around adding the menus and stuff. Somebody else is adding some updated graphics to the buttons. Someone's working on level 8, someone's working on level 4. But it's live. You get to see everyone stampede all over your project. I'd love to see that. That would be really good. It's sort of like almost an expectation, I think, in work environments. That's kind of normal. Even in academia, that idea of a multi-user space where you get to see everyone collaborate is getting normal as well. And it's super intuitive. You would want to work with a small team, and instead of having to pass files backwards and forwards by email or Dropbox, etc., you skip a step, which is what we're all about in GameGuru Maxland. Is there any way we can skip a step so we can knock this game out faster? The multi-user skips out a lot of steps. But as I said, it's a pet project. It's certainly not something GameGuru Max is going to see anytime soon. It does lean into this idea of multiplayer, but don't get your hopes up. Multiplayer is a whole other thing. It could even be a whole other product, and I'm probably not going to be the one to write it. But multi-user, I have a soft spot for that, and I think maybe there's something we can play around with as a prototype in a year or two, if we're still around by then. If we haven't gone completely bankrupt. Okay, Bloodmean Interactive, who has King #1 for some reason. I guess he's the king. Is it possible to have different terrain textures per project? How would texture streaming impact the current system? Well, there's two questions. Let's take the first part. Terrain textures, yes. You can actually have terrain textures per level. So you could have multiple terrain texture banks across your game project, but you can only have one terrain texture set per level. So that's your limit. And yes, you can do it. If you can't find a way to do it, it could easily be a bug. It could be a bug you've found. If it is a bug, post it as a bug, and then we'll get to the bottom of that. If it turns out it isn't a bug and it doesn't exist and Lee's just making it up as he goes along, then it becomes a feature request and we'll look into it. But I distinctly remember playing with custom terrain textures, and it was on a per level basis because almost immediately somebody wanted that feature, and I thought it makes sense. People just don't want to keep using the same old textures that we provided. People want to make their own, and it was done on a per level basis. And the second part of the question, how would texture streaming impact the current system? Well, the current system is DirectX 11, and we're not doing texture streaming for that. With DirectX 12 prototype and eventual DirectX 12 build, texture streaming won't occur. Whatever textures you give it for the terrain, whatever textures you use for objects, texture used for the sky, texture used for everything, texture streaming is it's a system that will just take whatever texture and do proper things with that texture, store the right size of texture, use it at the right time, get rid of it when it doesn't need it anymore. It's completely a separate system that just does whatever it needs to do with its textures, whether that's on the terrain or not. So it doesn't impact us at all. It's just a case of you get it with DX12, you won't get it with DX11. Maverick Media, any considerations for increasing the types of formats we can import? Alembic would be fantastic for destructive animations, for example. Yeah, proprietary file formats is a tricky one. Why? Because there's probably 250 proprietary file formats from proprietary products that are out there. I generally prefer those file format standards that are shared across the industry. That's why I kind of used to gravitate to things like .x file, and then DDS, which is DirectX, and then JPEG and PNG for the images, then FBX and GLTF for the 3D, and WAV and MP3 and OGG for the audio. Gravitating to those things that there's tools, many tools that all can output that one format. When you talk about a file format where only one product can export it, you kind of change yourself to that one product. Now, if that one product is like a world-beating, world-class product and there's no one anywhere near it, yeah, I can see the sense in that. But I do kind of shy away from sort of supporting one proprietary format, because then immediately it's like, well, if you're supporting that one, can you support my 50 top preferences? And that's where it gets a bit muddy. Not saying no, what I'm saying is go onto the GitHub issues board, post it as a feature request, send me that as a link by lee@basic.com, and I'll check it out. Because to be honest, I actually don't know what alembic is. I mean, it sounds like destructive animations. GameGuru Max have been destroying animations for 2 years. GameGuru Classic is even better at destroying animations, but I assume that's not what the file does. Okay, looking for a question. This is from Mesmerism Music. Not the first question. Is there a way we could make characters from Classic work in Max? No. No. Well, yes, but you're going to have to write the C++ yourself. And the characters that you do bring in from Classic, pretty rubbish. Not saying if you created your character rubbish. It's just the way those characters are assembled, it's pretty poor. It's just like sometimes the head just floats off the body. It's not a great solution. But if you want to implement that, learn a bit of C++, learn how Classic did it. The Classic repo is available. So you got all the source code to both products. I dare say there is a way to add a feature where Classic characters are running around in Max, but we're not going to do that. That's stepping backwards. We want to move forwards. Speaking of moving forwards, now I have to move backwards because I've lost my place. It's great to see questions though. I'm looking at the clock. We're at 8:40. That would put us about 1.5 hours in if you disregard the 7 minutes mesmerizing splash screen. So that's the end of the broadcast, everyone. No, only joking. That's the end of the official time. But I was worried we weren't going to get enough questions to fill the official slot. And as I can see more questions, we're now entering extra time. So everyone gets an extra 30 minutes. Hooray! That being said, I need to find the next question, which I found here. This is from Casper Forever Digital 5627. Will there be more work on the project system done? Oh yeah. The remote project system was introduced about a year ago, a year and 6 months ago, and it was a really great idea. It kind of allowed people who didn't want any stock art and all custom art and full control of their files and something that's then easy to back up their project in a single click. The remote project system, very cool. So we will continue to be working on that because of its capabilities now and the improvements we can make to make it even better. So yeah, expect more improvements on that project system. I know some people will chime in and say, make it exactly like Unity or make it exactly like Unreal. No, we're not in the business of copying other people's products. I think anyone who knows me knows that. I am allergic to just copying somebody else's stuff. So if someone just pastes in the project system for a rival product, I'm probably deliberately going to try and do something different. Okay, question. Any questions? Nope. This is a question from Making Games about the blood. We do have a new blood shader that I think will do what was asked, just assign an NPC and it will work. There you go. There's so many features going on in GameGuru Maxland that I'm literally not aware of. So the best place to find out if such a feature even exists is not to listen to my live broadcast, it's to go onto Discord, ask a question there. You probably get a better answer than asking a question here. Here's a question, another one from Casper. Are we going to get more shader options for assets? No. Well, maybe. The new DirectX 12 Wicked engine has a lot of improvements to its shaders. So technically the answer is yes, but I'm not the one that's going to write them. We're just going to use out of the box shader whatever from the latest Wicked engine. I already know there's some really very cool effects and features in the latest one that could only have been done with new shaders. So the answer is yes, but they will be done by using the latest Wicked engine. And there aren't any plans to open up some customized shader options in GameGuru Max for the time being. Here's a question. What is the percentage chance of DX12 release in Q1 of 2026? Gut feeling, no pressure. Anyone who says no pressure is literally applying some pressure. Percentage chance Q1 for a final release of DX12 0. How's that for a definitive answer? I want to spend at least 3 months in prototyping. I want to play with it. Now what I can say is if anyone's interested, and do let me know, I can make the prototype versions available so other people can play with it. I'm quite happy to do that. In fact, it'll help me with the testing and making sure that we're doing in the right direction. But for this is the final version, this is a DirectX 12 build, everyone should switch to this in the next 3 months. No, I think that would be irresponsible. I think we need, because it's such a seismic shift, a lot of the code has to be changed. There's a lot of areas within the current DirectX 11 Max that there isn't a DX12 equivalent of. Generating those thumbnails that you see when you browse a lot of objects. We used to have to supply a .bmp to provide the thumbnail, but when we changed the system in Max so the thumbnail could be any size, we had to generate it on the fly. There was no way for the old DX11 Wicked engine to do that. We had to write it in DX11. Is there now a version in DX12? I don't know. But again, that's basically what it's all about. It's like we don't know. That's what the prototype phase is going to tell us. What is possible, what we have to write, what we have to drop. It's going to be an interesting process, and I think we need at least 3 months to go through that. 3com, different biomes in the same project. Is it in the to-do list? I would say there are no plans to add different biomes in the same project, just as a reflex reaction, because I haven't even encountered this request before. I would say anyone can do different biomes in the same project. Every time you create a level, you go to the terrain generator, and the first thing it asks you is which biome do you want to use. Level 1 is desert, level 2 is Arctic, level 3 is forest, level 4 is whatever. So yes, different biomes in the same game project. Maybe I'm being stupid, but I would say that's already in there. Okay, oh, yeah, we're still okay. So the latest update mentions a performance editor. Was that an AI exaggeration, or are you missing something? That is AI summarizing and dropping the ball. There's no such thing as a performance editor. At least there's no performance editor that I know of in GameGuru Max that has been committed. Perhaps Prebens put an entire performance editor inside GameGuru Max that I know nothing about, the AI picked up on. But when I see something anomalous like that, and AI and anything to do with it, just blame AI. You know, AI at the moment is not free of hallucinations. It will occasionally just go off on a tangent and then vigorously stick to its original concept. So I'm not sure what performance editor is, but if it's any clue, the initials PE is also Prebens' name. So maybe that's where the AI got it from. So yeah, who knows? Maybe there is a performance editor in there. I ain't seen it. Can we have a proper prefabs, pretty please? There are no plans to add proper prefabs to GameGuru Max, as I don't know what that means. We have smart objects, or what I like to call composite entities, which I think is pretty cool. In fact, if you create a structure in the building editor and drag it in, it's dragged in as a smart object. And that's one hell of a composite object. You've got the shell of the building, you've got the doors, you've got the windows, you've got lots of things. You've even got lights entities as part of that composite object. It's pretty impressive. But apparently that's not proper enough. So I would suggest you make a feature request on the issues board. Go into some detail on what the PP is. That would help. Okay, question marks. We're looking for the question. Oh, wait. Oh, I just hit the bottom of the chat. We just found the bottom. We found the bottom of the ocean. I can let go of that damn scroll bar now. So, sorry, I can't pronounce it. Let's pronounce it. Mesmerize music, of course. Mesmerize. Will we be able to import custom foliage and use it with the foliage tool? Custom foliage, yeah, that's been around for a while. That will be in the feature requests on the issues board. For those who want to detangle the terminology, foliage is grass. So basically, at the moment, you can spray down some grass. And the idea is, can we have some custom grass? I think you can already do that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can actually specify a different grass bank folder with different grass images in there. Don't hold your breath. I'm sure that's the case. If it's not, I'm just making it up and it doesn't exist yet. But I do remember being able to change the grass bank folder for a set of grasses of your own design. But DX12 build might change everything to do with grass. Right now, our grass is just an image on a transparent background that gets plopped in. And I don't know whether the new DX12 Wicked Engine grass does it in a different way. Does it actually use vertices to draw individual blades of grass, or whether it's just the same idea of taking an image but doing cleverer things with it? Because it's based on this idea of a Her particle system, it might be, it's still an image, but it's an image of one blade, and then it just uses lots of those images in order to create realistic looking grass. So yeah, I think it's in there. Yes, you can quote me on it, and if I am lying, definitely send me a link at lee@dirtbasic.com and say that's a mistake, there is none. It should be in there, because we did custom terrain textures and we did custom grass textures. The only thing I don't think we did is custom trees, because trees were a pig. Trees were a pig to create. In order to get the performance, we had to do some fudgery, and there was so much fudgery, it wasn't a case of just dragging in a picture of a tree or a model of a tree. It had to be a sort of a skill set where you needed to provide both in just the right lighting and angle and size. And so yeah, the trees you've got, those are basically fixed. But we're throwing all the trees away apparently and using a whole new system, possibly. So we'll know more when we do the DX12 Proto. Okay, we're looking. There we go. What is Alembic? ABC. It was created by ILM and available to use in most 3D modeling tools. You gotta love acronyms. I'm not any wiser. Oh, it's 3D. Okay, it's a 3D file format. Okay. So yeah, it's a new question. The latest and last question. We are eating into the clock. I think we've got 20 more minutes. Cool. Any more questions? Feel free to throw them my way. I'm happy to stay here for another 20 minutes. And I'll keep mentioning the time, but after 20 years of partial management training, I've been brainwashed into looking at the clock and being time critical, down to the second sometimes. This is the question from that model guy, 6011. Any plans to make the tree system customizable, like custom trees for PBR trees? It doesn't look like they can be altered at the moment. No, they cannot be altered. As I said, the trees, I wouldn't say they were a fudge, but we had to create the high-res model with the separate leaves, and then lower levels of LOD, because you even trees even just moderately in the distance that are too high poly will just kill your frame rate. And so there were several LODs of the 3D. Then it went down to an imposter, a billboard, where it was just a picture of that tree. But then the lighting had to be right. So under natural lighting conditions, the 3D model and then the imposter image had to be close enough that you didn't see too much of a pop. And then when we might even have had several versions of that billboard image as well as it went further and further away, possibly stored into the mipmap chain. So now you're asking someone to model a tree, do several LODs, be aware of the lighting constraints, then create an image of that 3D model in such a way that it's compatible with whatever texture format we needed to store it in, and build up a bitmap chain that still worked as the tree went further and further into the distance. No thank you. I think all anybody wants is give me a model of a tree, import it, and have the engine create all of that nonsense, and now you've got a tree. The beauty with the DX12 prototype work is because we have to throw away our tree system and replace it with another tree system. If there is a tree system in the latest Wicked engine, it could simply be a very good method of drawing an object over and over and over again. Maybe that's what we end up with. And in that case, yes. Especially if now we've got something like auto log generation. The Wicked engine takes care of turning a 3D model into that imposter billboard. It could be a case of just picking a tree and importing it. So I would say to guess, this is not a promise, but when we do the DX12 prototype work and then we're working on the new tree system, we'll go with that approach. We just want to import a 3D model of a tree and have it work. At that point, you have custom trees. Hooray! Industrial Light and Magic, thank you for the acronym explanation. I should have known that. Industrial Light and Magic have really contributed to our industry indirectly over the years. I mean, obviously they started their life off, I guess, in the movie industry. Now the games industry is bigger than the film industry and the music industry combined by a considerable margin. But yeah, they certainly pioneered a lot of the techniques that we now take for granted, only now we can run it all in real time on a rather modest games graphics card. Now that is the last question. We are 15 minutes from the terminus where everything comes to an end. So I can just give you a summary and wait for a few more questions. I'm quite happy to answer. So the summary is we continue to fix bugs. So as I said, I'm down to 8 that I can see, and those are now squarely divided between Cassius, who is going to be responsible for reproducing the bugs and then posting additional evidence into that bug report so it can be very quickly and easily reproduced by whoever reads that bug. It's amazing how quickly you can get through a bug list if the bug is easy to reproduce. When a bug is hard to reproduce or impossible to reproduce, that bug just lingers in the list, and none of us want that. We want to be able to get these bugs reproduced, fixed, signed off, move on to the next one. So Cassius's role is well defined. And then Preben and I will be dividing the bugs between ourselves. Obviously, I also have the responsibility of running DBS and setting up all of its bits and pieces. As I said, I still need to set up all the websites. For those who don't know, it was something that we had sort of floating up in the air. All our old forums, we felt because it's like 20 years of game making knowledge, it would be a shame to lose that. So when we did the migration of servers, we kept all those forums. But we needed you to log in order to get the attachments or see the images in the forum posts. Again, it's the same idea where we're losing all of that knowledge. Fortunately, we also retained all the attachments, and now we've updated the GameGuru forums and the TGC forums, so you don't need to be logged in anymore. So now you'll be able to get access to all of them attachments. I know I'm shooting myself in the foot here now because I'm going to have to pay for the bandwidth, but I think it's an excellent knowledge base. It's something that, again, speaks to the testimony of what we've been doing over the last 25 years, and I'm happy to continue to run those servers. So I'll be doing all of the bits and pieces that one person has to do to run an entire company, and Preben will be helping out with some bug fixes, and I'll step in from time to time when I fancy fixing a bug or two. My main development work will be the DX12 prototype. That's where the next evolution of this product will be. When DX11 gets discontinued, we want a new architecture to step onto, and if we already have the architecture and we've been using it for a year or two, all the better. So that's basically the plan. As I mentioned very briefly, but I'll mention it again, quite happy to do these live broadcasts again in 2026. So we've not figured out the exact dates, but there'll be one around June, July, and then again one in December, just before everyone breaks for the holiday season. And if anyone wants to see more or less based on this December live broadcast for the structure and the format for 2026 live broadcast, please let us know. We are very receptive for these 2 hours, or could be 4 hours if you let Lee go off on a tangent. We are here to help. We are to answer any questions, show you things you might want to see, and we can sort of plan all that ahead. I'd like to sort of start showcasing games that are nearly ready for release, not only for newcomers who they won't sit through 2 hours of live broadcast, but had they sit through 2 hours, at the first 30 minutes they'll actually see some really cool games that have been created, and it really is a testimony to the product. It's like, what is the proof in the pudding with the Game Mega? Well, it's the games that you've made in it, and it'd be great if I could show some of those games. So it's like the shortcut, isn't it? It's like me trying to explain how to make a game. I'll just show you a finished game. That's the best advertising I can think of for GameGuru Max. So we have one more question from Blood Moon Interactive. Thanks very much. Means I'm not waffling too much. Making games, we get those bugs fixed fast. We do. That's the thing, you see. It's like, what is the difference between the TGC method and the DBS method? Is DBS has nothing else to do. Largely, it's like, oh yeah, we just sit down and we look at the issues board every day. We still fix as many bugs as we can get away with. So that's about as focused as you'd want. But once we get to the point where the product is rock solid and the bugs are like become silly, like GameGuru Max didn't work because I threw water all over my keyboard. When we get to that point, yes, I think that's going to be an exciting phase when we start saying, well, we're bored now, let's add some features. But we've learned from our mistakes. Adding features too numerous or too quickly just introduces an infinity of bugs, and nothing ever gets stable. So the plan is, let's get it stable. Let's get an LTS version in the world where you can rely on that version of GameGuru Max for as long as your game project takes to create. So here is the question. May I contact Cassius directly? I have an idea to make his reproduction easier. Well, if you want to give Cassius advice on his reproduction activity, go for it. Staying well out of it. Joke. Yes, absolutely. It's Cassius. That's his forum name. His email is chris@dirtbasic.com. And for anyone who's curious, he is my youngest brother. So we're keeping it in the family at the moment. And he's been into computers for as long as I have, basically, deducting the years he's not been on the planet Earth where I have. And he's multifaceted, he's highly skilled at cyber security and all the things I didn't want to learn. And right now, he's had to lower himself to the tawdry task of reproducing bugs before he gets into some fun stuff like Python scripting and server-side things. So yes, if you see Cassius, he's the guy who's going to try and reproduce your bug for you and then pass it to either me or Preben so we can fix it super quick. So let's see if there's any more questions after that one. The quarterly would be good. I assume you mean live broadcasts. Well, if it's quarterly, that's 2 extra live broadcasts I have to produce, and if I'm doing live broadcasts, I'm not fixing bugs. It's a pitiful excuse, but it's the one I'm going to stick to, as we've only got 10 minutes left. You haven't got time to argue. Lots of animations in GG Max, example. Okay, I guess that's in response to some earlier question or some chat. And is that a question? Custom character scripts seem to require okay, that'd be a question. Or it's a postulate. That model guy asks, custom character scripts, I don't know what that is, seem to require bytecode along with them to get the scripts to work. I'm assuming that they're generated with the script editor. Alright, I see what you mean. Yeah, the behaviours, let me just show you one. I mean, I had GameGuru Max open so I could sort of demonstrate some stuff. But I guess no questions required me to do a demo. But I get to do it in the last 8 minutes, hooray. So yeah, let's go to this guy. So this is a character. It was created in the character creator, and it has what's called a behavior. This one has cover attack. So basically, once the game starts, the player's over there. He's going to hide behind that stack here, or if it's low, he'll then duck to make sure his head doesn't get shot off. This guy, prone attack, so he will literally dive to the ground, exposing a low profile from a distant player, but he'll still be able to shoot, etc. and stuff like that. Now these, the cover attack, the melee attack, the prone attack, the soldier attack, they all use bytecode. What am I talking about? Let me show you. I'm going to stand back because they'll try and shoot me. Okay, that's fair enough. Back. Look at this. Edit behaviors. Yeah, they're still going to try and shoot me. Right. So you can see here we've got all the different behaviors that are just reference. Prone attack, cover attack, da 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 da. You see all this? You may not be familiar with it. This is what I'm calling behavior editor code. And when this gets saved, it's saved as bytecode. And what this is the logic. It's like a flowchart of everything that character does. If you see this, do that. If you don't see it, do that. If you smell this, do that. If you don't do anything, do the other. If you're at this level, do this. It's basically programming, but it's done in the form of a flowchart. And this gets saved out as bytecode, so that when this behavior is attached to an object, it's not in script. You know, that behavior isn't a lot of Lua. Actually, it's quite short. All it does, that Lua script, is load in the bytecode and then runs an interpreter inside Lua to perform all of these conditions and actions. Now, I'm the first to admit that this behavior editor is atrocious. It is the worst programming language in the last 20 years that I've constructed. It was built so it was functional enough for me to create that bytecode and get objects running around. Simple scripts, fine, but when you're doing something like as sophisticated as a character running around, I needed something a bit more versatile, and bytecode is my go-to. Data Basic Classic used bytecode because the language was an interpreted language, but the UI is horrible. Trying to modify and change and track and find bugs in it, horrible. So I'll be taking the general back-end principle of bytecode and logic done in a visual way, but I want to get rid of all this and make something that's super easy to go in. And as I said, it's my pet project. How do you create logic in an intuitive way that doesn't confuse everyone and doesn't get unreadable when the logic gets big? But no straight answers at the moment, but this is the bytecode that was just referred to. It is attached to this behavior, and that behavior loads in this bytecode and then follows it using an interpreter that's built in to GameGuru Max. And if you want to know what that interpreter look for masterinterpreter.lua in the script bank folder and have a read through it. I think you'll figure it out. It's pretty straightforward, but it's exciting. It's the sort of thing that I'd like to get my teeth into, but that's the back end and it's not for everyone. So the behavior editor, programmer's eyes only. Eventually, version 5 or whatever, it will be easy as just clicking on an object, opening a window, farting around with the logic for a little bit, and away you go. And some extra bonus points is you can change the logic as the game is playing. You can see the logic run in debug mode as the game is playing. You can add and subtract modules as the game is playing. You get the idea. You get the idea. Well, that's basically the difference between, say, the bytecode that's attached to a character and, for example, a barrel that has a behavior for, I don't know, exploding. Do we have an exploding? Yeah, there you go. So there you go. That one doesn't need bytecode. It's just some Lua. So anyone can knock out some Lua script. Not everyone can do wonderful iconography. Thanks, Netcrim. And thanks, Tom. But yeah, if you can do it all, then you've got everything that you need to create your own behaviors and attach them to objects. So we're looking at the clock, or 7. That puts us exactly at 2 hours, almost exactly. So I'm going to read off the rest of the questions if there is any, and then we're going to call it a day for 6 months. unless they get a lot of petitions that you absolutely have to do a live broadcast in March on your birthday. Maybe I'll succumb. Maybe I'll succumb. Okay, so is that going to get some more user-friendly updates? Those one scripts, I can't get dirty. Yeah, that kind of what I've just said. I do want to clean it up, make it more intuitive so more people can use it. I think logic is where it's at. Once you've done all the custom graphics, right, at that point you want your gameplay to be unique to your ideas. And that's something that's much more difficult than, say, changing a texture or changing a sound effect or changing a level's layout. The logic, that's always been the province and purview of the coder. And I think that's very unfair. I think everyone should have the ability to create logic. It is. The behavior editor is extremely powerful and extremely obfuscated. So if you are curious, check it out. It works. I use it all the time. I created the cover attack entirely using the behavior editor. And the cover attack does a lot of really cool things. So go check it out. Now you know how to get access to it. So I'd say that's it for this live broadcast. Thanks very much for your patience. It only took 6 months since the last broadcast. And if you want any changes to this structure or this format, as I said, drop me a line at lee@databasic.com and then we'll come up with something cool to present to you in June, July. Of course, in the meantime, we're always available. Sometimes I'm on Discord. Most, if not all of the time, I'm in GitHub. If you go on GitHub right now, I think it's public. It might not be, but I think it is. The DirectX 12 repos for GameGuru and the latest Wicked engine, I think, are on there. It doesn't compile yet, and it's way too early, but you will be able to step in there and check out activity and commits just to see what's going on in DX12 land if you're interested in that. But we will do formal Steam announcements and when we've got something solid to share and show you in the progress of DX12, which is something that I'll be spending a lot of my dev time on. When I'm not doing that, basically coordinating the completion of GameGuru Max to what I call the good version 1. We'll end up coining that term, I'm sure. So thanks again. We'll get this edited up and put on YouTube for everyone to watch. And until either March or June or July, I will say thank you for your kind attention. And how do I turn this off then? That's a quote from Red Dwarf, but I literally don't know how to end this broadcast. It's been that long. I'm going to have to start pressing buttons. Yeah, I think I found it. Okay, great. Well, have a great holiday season, everyone, and I'll speak to you again in a couple of months. Goodbye.